This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
But what has really accelerated over the last 8 years is our young people are demanding this of us. They need it, they require it. And I feel like the tone has shifted from resenting them for being that way to more companies going, oh, it actually is a better way to be, right? Actually, maybe they've got it right. Maybe they're not all wrong about it. And it does feel better when we can see each other and we can do good work and I can bring my whole self to work, even if things are falling apart outside of work, and I don't have to try to hide that from you. And if all of that is true and compassion can exist.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. My guest today is Meg Brown. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Cambridge Air Solutions. We talked about compassionate leadership, employee experience, and the role of unconditional love and living your values as an organization. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Meg. I'm really excited to be talking to you today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, before we get into the topic, I would love to know from you, what is one thing that you've done in any area of your life that you never thought you would do?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I want to answer it in two ways, a personal one and a work one, because they both came kind of at the same time when I think about it. Personal is, so it's two things. So I'm already not following the rules, but such is life. Personal, I have four sons, and I definitely knew I was going to be a mom. But the concept of, and definitely probably would have said a bigger family, but the idea that they would all be boys and that I'd be in this very all boy environment is definitely something that I would not have predicted would happen. So that's my personal thing. Could never have said I would have done. The other one is a little more recent work wise. Certainly that I was recently promoted to being COO. And when I think about that here at Cambridge, it's not something I would have predicted for myself. Not necessarily not holding a leadership role, but the idea of doing that in such an operations heavy side of the business and in manufacturing is just couldn't have predicted it given my degree, the trajectory of my career at one point. Like, it was definitely not headed in this direction. And here I am. So that's kind of is an interesting question to ask at this moment in time. Yeah.
Well, those are two pretty big, important life trajectories that you're talking about, your career and your family. And interesting that you sort of had some of it in mind, just not the way it played out. Interesting. All right. I love that you are in a leadership role in manufacturing, and we are talking about compassion and courage and unconditional love, which is going to be one of the topics that we talk about. I think for some people, maybe many people, manufacturing wouldn't seem like that's an area where we would be thinking a lot about those concepts. To get us started, I mean, what do you think about compassion in your organization, and how is it that you have embedded it into your culture?
What I think about compassion at Cambridge, I think many small examples come to my mind, like when someone loses a loved one, we have cards, like we just have a stack of blank sympathy cards, and anyone can come grab them and send them home. A lot of times when the word compassion comes up, people might think about losing someone they love, right? And so that's a very small way that we do things at Cambridge that I think are how we act out why compassion, or how we sort of impact each other in a compassionate way. And otherwise, I think really compassion and the ability to see each other as humans is foundational and absolutely necessary for the kind of culture we are striving to continue to build one step at a time, because it's a never ending. You got to keep on improving. But I think at Cambridge it becomes really important that it starts with, you're a human. I care about you just because of that. There's no requirement beyond that for you to be worthy of love and care. And that is actually going to help us do some freaking amazing work together that's actually going to drive things like bottom line and good operational processing and taking really excellent care of our customers. But a lot of that is very hard to do if we can't first start with seeing each other as humans and being compassionate.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate the idea of the cards after someone's lost a loved one, because one thing you're showing is it doesn't necessarily have to be complicated to truly show compassion.
It's true. Yeah. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, it can just be a simple card. And I know people that have received them say it's the craziest thing. Like one day you go out to your mailbox and there's like lots and lots of cards from different people in your workplace. And it really means something. Like you feel like, oh, wow, they really, like the place I work really cares about me and my extended family, right? Like my family has felt this impact for whatever the loss is. And that's, yeah. So I think it's one of these very simple ways. And it's also interesting. We're a family, second generation family owned business. A lot of times these kinds of feels are so common in family businesses because they can feel like family. But as you get bigger and scale, it can be really hard to keep these practices. And those cards are one very simple, very scalable. Anybody can grab one at any time and fill it out. And it doesn't matter if we have 50 employees or 300 employees, it's still something we can do. And it still feels so personal and good.
Absolutely. And everyone appreciates being seen. And that's what those cards do. Now, you mentioned scale. I think that might feel like a block for some people in an organization. How can we do something that matters for our X hundreds, X thousands of employees? How do you scale compassion when at its heart, it's one on one, it's you and me communicating?
Yeah. Such a good question. And something we continue to kind of grapple with at here at Cambridge. We have a couple of things that have worked really well for us that come to mind when I think about that. One is, I would say, the ability for one person to do it for all is doesn't work. It's not possible, right? You can't be all things to all people. And so it doesn't matter where you're sitting in the organization, senior leader, line worker, doesn't matter. You can't do that. And so was in before I got promoted is leading people. So being the HR leader, and I'd be thinking, okay, how do I get more people thinking about caring for one another first, or compassion first in their all day, everyday interactions? And how do we help them continue to grow the habit of starting from a place of love and care? The couple ways we do that is one, I learned pretty quickly, and honestly myself, that it doesn't work if I can't do it for myself. So if I can't be compassionate towards my own self and feel pretty good and healthy and giving my own self the care, then it's a lot harder to give it to others if I'm not giving it to myself. So in many leadership journeys, they all, I think all roads lead back to how are you showing up for yourself first. So we've tried to help our folks work on that. And one of the ways we do is literally my very first day here, Manya, like it will be 8 years in August. I was joined the leadership team as the HR leader, and I was in a leadership team meeting, and the meeting started with this thing called personal professional check-in. And I'm like, what's that? And so every person took a turn, and it was just a couple minutes, and you were meant to share highest highs, lowest lows, personally and professionally. In their case, it was in the last week because they were together the week before. And here I am, this brand new person. Obviously, I had met a bunch of them in my recruitment process, but it was my literally first day, first hour, maybe even. But I got a chance to see what it meant. Like these leaders are being really honest about and courageously vulnerable about things that are hard and things that are difficult and things that are amazing and that they're excited about. And in a couple minutes across 6 or 7 different people, we were connected. We could see each other, we could feel each other, we knew each other. And one of the coolest things I learned then is that the only response allowed is thank you for sharing. There's no follow-up question. There's no, oh gosh, if I save this and they're going to ask me all these questions, I'm going to have to explain or no. So, I mean, you might privately circle back to somebody if you have a connection with them and you want to, check in, but in that moment right there, you say thank you for sharing. Yeah. So that is a rhythm that exists in, I would say, most of our teams, if not all. They may vary in frequency, like it may not be weekly in every team, but we're definitely checking up on how are you? How are you really? And giving our folks a place to put hard things in the workplace that are personal in nature.
Hi, it's Manya. You're listening to Notes on Resilience, conversations about leadership, recovery, and how we show up in the difficult moments. If something here hits home, or if you're navigating a crisis, or you're seeing something in your team you want to talk through, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch at my website, manyachilinski.com. Now, back to the episode.
Yes, absolutely. And I really appreciate you recognize, yes, share the hard things. We absolutely want to hear those. Those are important. And please also share the amazing things because those are also important. I feel that sometimes people are afraid of if we make ourselves vulnerable or we talk about compassion, that it's going to be some sort of trauma dump.
Yeah, well, and I think that's where some of the ground rules help because it's only a couple of minutes and right. And it's high highs, low lows. But guess what? You get to choose what your highest high, like you get to choose how far you take that. And so I've been in the room long enough with some teammates have been with me since that very first day. And I can tell you that even those that would not go as vulnerable, maybe out of the gate as others, there will be a time in their life, I can confidently say after almost 8 years, where they need to say something really hard and they need a place to put it in the organization. And it might be a work thing and it might be a personal thing, but they need somewhere to put it so that the world around them, that where they spend most of their time, which is work, can know I'm going through something really hard. And if I'm not myself, or if I'm distracted, or if I'm short tempered, or if I need to leave a lot, or whatever it is, I've just watched even those who keep cards a little closer to the vest, which is completely okay. It's their decision. There will be a time in their life where they want to tell us something, and we create this rhythm so that it's available whenever they actually need it. There for the taking to say, this really horrible thing happened to my family, and I'm reeling, and I can't focus on work, and I can't, and we get a chance to say, thank you for sharing. And then sometimes we might actually follow up with like, hey, what support do you need? And like, there are some circumstances where you might follow up more specifically, but I've seen it be really neat in that perspective. And I think it's like a really small rhythm that actually is driving. As I was getting ready to talk to you, I was like, man, that really is, when I think about compassion at Cambridge, I think that simple check-in is a way we are ensuring or at least prompting a connection point pretty regularly in almost all of our teams.
Yes. And it's an illustration again of that it's pretty simple. And the effect is deep and intense and important, but the act is fairly simple and it's easy to explain. And I appreciate that you're mentioning it happens on some sort of rhythm, whatever that might be for the team, but it's an expectation. And the other piece of it that I really appreciate is people get to share what they want to share. There's not a pressure to go deep. If you want to say that the worst thing that happened to you this week is they were sold out of your favorite pizza, you can say that. It doesn't have to be a death in the family or a trauma or something truly. I think there can also be struggles with if people are sharing their stories, we want to make sure they feel safe. And maybe that means not telling your story.
Yeah, it might sometimes. And that needs to be honored in the system as well, right? Like that matters a whole lot because it isn't, you better tell us who you are. It's we want to know the whole you. And one of the ways we try to do that is this rhythm. And when you're ready, you can lower, or if it's raise the bar on vulnerability, or some, I've heard it described as like the floor, like how low, how deep are you going to go, whichever way around you like to think of it. Like you're actually, each individual is kind of they are in control of that, right? For their own selves on that day, at that time, whenever they're.
And in this environment, right, it may be something they share with their friends and their spouse or their family, and never bring it into the workplace. How do you, or do you have a way of measuring the impact that this has made on the business? This level of compassion and sharing. I know people ask me, how can I draw a straight line between taking this action and showing that it's improving the bottom line? I don't know that there is a straight line, but I'm curious how you navigate that.
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind. Straight line, I would agree. I have yet to find one, but we have a couple of ways that we use that together give us an idea of it. One is that we use Gallup's Q12 engagement survey. We do it once a year with a checkpoint mid-year to see if teams have been following up on the actions they choose to improve engagement on their team. And the reason I bring it up is that there are questions in there that are pointed at this very idea. One of them is my supervisor. I feel it's, I'm going to get the exact wording wrong, but it's basically my supervisor cares about me is one of the questions. Another question is I have a best friend at work. Another, so there are questions that are actually getting at a compassionate. I'm seen as a human here, and therefore I think my teammates are too, because a couple of the questions are like, as you look across, my peers do quality work and some of that kind of stuff. And so we've been able to use that to have a sense of how are we doing on some of this stuff. And I can say that in our most recent Gallup, which was the end of April, our supervisor cares about me. I think it was definitely one of our top 2 of the 12 questions. And so that was remarkable to us, like to know that, because to your point, scale is really hard. And it honestly comes down to the leader. Not because they need to be seen as an expert and amazing. No, they actually need to be seen as human, and they need to engage other humans in a human experience. And so our supervisors and our people leaders at Cambridge appear to be doing a phenomenal job of making sure that their team members know they care about them. And that helps us a lot to know, okay, so we are delivering in that relationship pretty well. It also gives me a ton of kind of confidence and encouragement that we can continue to move those leaders further down the journey to get stronger and stronger at it and better at it, and that we together can keep improving the culture in that way.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I mean, that's a testament to the work that you and the other leaders have been doing with these check-ins and with all of your work, that it's one of the top answers that people really feel cared about. So I know that you guys are honoring that within your team, but I want to just recognize that because that's amazing. You and I talked in our pre-call about the concept of unconditional love. I don't think a lot of people would think of workplace unconditional love in the same sentence. And I'm curious what that means to you.
Yeah. So to me, it means that I said some of it, some of the words I've been using come straight from our definition of unconditional love here at Cambridge, which is that you don't have to do anything to earn or to be worthy of being seen as someone lovable and to be loved here at Cambridge. And what we do have, and we've described that with behaviors like investing time in getting to know each other, building a culture where we can be authentic, transparent, and vulnerable, getting curious when there's conflict, and forgiving. These are behavior statements that we have published that are all over our walls that we talk about in daily huddles that explain what we mean by unconditional love. And we're really trying to love each other for who we are and not what we do. And we want to extend benefit of the doubt. That's really, really hard. And you're right, it's a little odd in a workplace because we do have to get work done, right? And we do have to have goals, and we do have to make progress. And it can't all just be love and However, we do think here fundamentally humans do their best work when they are feeling that way, right? So it feels foundational to us, but we balance it with its back half, which is unconditional love and high expectations. So we don't tend to talk about them separately. We tend to talk about them as a package deal because high expectations is like, look, we want to be clear about our expectations and we want to hold each other accountable for good results while also being loving and not judging each other and not getting upside down relationally while trying to do that. Does that make, I hope that makes sense. And so, like some of those behaviors are celebrating all accomplishments, learning through failure, communicating clearly about where we are and where we want to go. And by doing that with this benefit of the doubt, we're able to deliver what I think is a balanced approach that is more accessible in a workplace environment.
Right. Well, you're living your values and you're enabling the employees to live the values as well with the reminders, with the actions that you take. You know, you mentioned the Gallup survey. The number of times I've heard employees say, did an employee engagement survey or we did a XYZ survey and we never found out what happened and we never heard the results. And I don't think they even looked at the results. Is That's what most people say. And I think that's because that's what happens. And you start to get too much data as the leadership team and you kind of don't know what to do with it. There's an expectation when you ask a question or you ask for somebody's opinion that you're going to listen to it. You may not do what they want, but you're going to listen. And it sounds like you have figured out the cadence of being able to listen and respond to the answers that you get, which I so appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about it this morning in our leadership team meeting because it's time to do Gallup rollout and every team will meet. They'll meet about their results and they together, not the leader deciding, but the leader facilitating the team and deciding what do we feel like working on? What's our data telling us? What do we like? What's not working? And what do we feel like would really move the needle for us? So kind of like for us, by us. And then they have to write it down and commit to it as an action item. And every single people leader at Cambridge has that expectation that you will conduct that meeting and your team will together come up with something. And that's been really awesome. And this is our third time taking the Gallup. And so this is our third year of this rhythm. And I'm actually excited about this year because I think the third year should be when leaders feel a little more practiced and it's not the first time except for a couple of new hires. And that feels really good. And I think you're right. That is one of our requirements of ourself, I should say, or the organization when we were looking for a new engagement survey was we have no business asking anyone to take a survey if we're not going to do something with the results. Like that should just be a non-starter. So if we aren't, as a leadership team, aren't committed to following up on whatever we learn in this, then we shouldn't do it. And so every year before we launch it, I just make sure, everybody good? Are we still ready to do what this is going to require of us on the backside? And so far it's been heck yeah, let's go. And so that's been really helpful, but I couldn't agree with you more because too many times you get asked you're just so right. You get asked your opinion and then it goes nowhere. And you wonder, did they even hear me? Like, doesn't really work. It doesn't feel very compassionate. Because like one of the basic potential skills on compassion is listening, right? And so if you aren't able to effectively listen, either individually or as an organization, then you're going to be really hard to claim compassion.
Yes. And I think as organizations get bigger, you get a lot of embedded processes, and maybe the survey's the thing you've always done, and nobody stops to question, should we continue doing it if we're not actually doing anything with the information? I know it can be easy to get stuck as the organizations get bigger. So we are living in interesting times in terms of our political climate and our social climate. And I'm curious, thinking about your own organization and organizations out there, how are you seeing that influencing leaders?
I know one of the ways I've seen it influence us is that it can be a burden. It can be something that is really difficult to carry. In fact, maybe it comes up in that personal professional check-in, right? As a thing that's weighing heavy on a leader or a group of leaders. And so I am seeing it appear in that way. And I think also we at Cambridge work really hard to protect our culture from some of these outside influences, and that matters to us. And so I'm trying to think of like how to describe that, but really, like if we focus on our core values that you and I've already talked through some of them, that should be a path towards seeing each other, no matter whether we believe the same, think the same, listen to the same news. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I can see you as a human have half a shot at coming to a solution together that feels better. And I sometimes wish that our larger world could get in that same boat and work that same way. So we at Cambridge can feel like we sometimes joke that we're like the island of misfit toys, because here we are trying to do it differently and trying to prove that you can, and saying like, hey, there's a way to lead a business that's different and that allows for this kind of behavior. Not that we are not the only company trying. There are many, and we rely on each other and look to each other as like beacons and help and inspiration. But it matters to us. So I would say, like, one, it can be a burden that's heavy, and so having a place to put it, kind of back to that personal professional check-in, matters. And then two, business can really make an impact and prove the model of seeing each other and working through hard things, even though we're not the same. And I just wish more of the world could be like that.
I agree. I love the personal professional check-in. If we could find a way to build that level of trust out in the world, which I think is what we're,
Yeah.
in my own opinion, is what we're missing, is the trust. But
Yeah. Through the lens of trust, for sure. Yeah. And just high judgment, so much judgment. And it's just hard.
it can be very difficult when people believe something diametrically opposed to what I believe in. It can be hard to find that empathy and that compassion and that humanity. On both sides, it can be difficult to find. So I love that you talked about your culture as its own entity, this thing that you need to protect. And I think that just says so much about how important compassion and unconditional love are as values in the organization. I think certainly many organizations, they just get a culture without necessarily thinking about what do we need to do to focus on culture. And I just love that you are so focused on it. I mean, obviously, given what I talk about, but it just sounds like an amazing place to work.
Well, we are certainly trying for it to be. So thank you.
It's still a place of work, and there are still things. I know, I understand that, but
I mean, look, we have good retention, low turnover. We have people who leave and come back. Like we've got some signs that are almost the traditional HR signs that they're working for us.
yeah.
Those are encouraging too, for sure.
Yeah, those are very encouraging, especially the rebound employees, people who leave and come back when they realize, oh, wait, the rest of the world doesn't do it this way.
Exactly. Yeah. We always say those are a good sign of and a good indicator. And then the other one is referrals. And what I mean by that is like you like it so much that you want your other people you care about to work here. That's another kind of cool sign. Yeah.
Yes, that's an impressive sign as well. So, what do you think is the biggest risk for organizations if they're not thinking about compassion and culture the way that you guys are?
Yeah. Something I've come to understand, and I think has even gone faster over my almost 8 years in a culture like this. And I sometimes joke that Cambridge is the culture I was like, I've participated in building what I needed as an employee myself. And so that's kind of funny. It's very like, oh, wow, this is like a self-fulfilling in a way. Like it feels very rewarding to pour into something that is also at the same time helping me, fueling me. And I know I'm not the only one here that feels that way. But what has really accelerated over the last 8 years is our young people are demanding this of us. They need it, they require it. And I feel like the tone has shifted from resenting them for being that way to more companies going, oh, it actually is a better way to be, right? Like, actually, maybe they've got it right. Maybe they're not all wrong about it. And it does feel better when we can see each other and we can do good work. And I can bring my whole self to work, even if things are falling apart outside of work, and I don't have to try to hide that from you. And if all of that is true and compassion can exist, so I think there's that happening. If you don't do it, your young people are going to compel it, and I think you're going to get left behind in the talent wars and in all the things that are happening. I just think that it's just so important. And then also what Gallup was excited. One of the reasons we chose Gallup is they showed, like, you see all the data and you're like, hey, if you do these things, it actually drives productivity. It lowers accidents, like safety accidents. It drives, I mean, it drives all, bottom line. The data is clear that this way of leading actually does grow the business. And there is a real life business case for those that want to find it. And so I think that's pretty compelling too. So if you don't do it for the increases in the right things and the lowering of the wrong things, then your young people are going to demand it of you sooner. They're not going to want to work for you if you don't have it.
Right, right, absolutely. Oh, Meg, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And before we wrap up, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you?
Well, I think some of the things that it's not necessarily a question, but we at Cambridge, you can come see us virtually or in person, kind of get a sense of how we do some of the things we do with some of our daily rhythms. So that's kind of cool. So if your listeners ever want to be like, how do they do that? You can go to cambridgeair.com/tours and you can come see us, whether it's from your own home virtually or you're happen to be in the St. Louis area, you can come see us. We love to do that because it helps us less alone in this compassion journey and in this culture journey, but then also we want to be in it with other companies. So, or other,
That's great. So we're going to put the link in the show notes so folks can find you more easily. And Meg, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk with you today.
I enjoyed every minute. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, and thanks to our listeners for listening to this episode of Notes on Resilience. We'll catch you next time.